Simply focusing on the greater context of what Peter's saying is that he's claiming my visitation will be denied over a whatever happened in 2008. So, first of all, that's false. There is a period of time for which past charges or past allegations can be used to impact someone, and there's a time when it no longer becomes legitimate or admissible or usable. This largely has to do with his misunderstanding of the law. And it's basically like this in every state, that the more time that elapses between whatever it is that occurred in the past and today, the less weight that it carries on anything that would occur in the future. So we're talking 16 years ago. It would be ludicrous for someone to hold up something that happened 16 years ago and say he's the exact same person today, which is absolutely not true. And so then that's where Mr. Ross's fraud scheme comes into play. So obviously, I can point directly to the Christy Waltz restraining order that she filed, and I could bring that up in a court of law, and I could show the evidence that when she made the allegations against me, that I was in fact 1,500 miles away in Los Angeles, and that it couldn't have occurred. Thankfully, court records and matters that arise in another state pretty much can't be used in West Virginia, essentially. So they're irrelevant to the case. Now, when Peter went in for his CSPO in 2015, the one that was dismissed twice, by the way, he tried to wave around a bunch of unrelated court records, and the lawyer said that doesn't mean anything. Peter can't understand that it's state to state. And so what occurs in one state is essentially irrelevant in another state because the laws in another state aren't the same in the second state. And so what could be a violation of law in Kentucky may not be a violation of the law in West Virginia. The way they handle things in Kentucky might be entirely different than something else in Virginia. There might be some statute or application of a statute that is uh, incongruous with the laws of West Virginia. That's why records from other states generally can't be used from state to state. Yet he seems to believe that somehow that his entire web of content, his narrative, social media monster, his allegations are somehow going to be used in a court of law to deny me visitation for my daughter. And that's simply not going to happen. I already know. Unlike Mr. Ross, I have experience with the courts in this particular county, and I know what their imperative is. And I know exactly what it is that they intend to do. They are not going to look at me, and they're not going to listen to the narrative of some crazy guy from another state, and no lawyer on earth that represents my daughter's mom or my daughter is going to show up waving around a bunch of bullshit from some crazy guy on the internet who runs a subreddit that writes messages to our 15-year-old daughter. That would be suicide of their case. But that's not going to stop him from trying. Do you understand? That's not going to stop Peter from trying to interfere. But the question is, what business is it of Mr. Ross's what happens between me and my daughter and my daughter's mom? Why is this strange man who has no connection to any of us, why is he trying to interfere? Why is he trying to inject himself into it? Why is it his business? It's one of those who the fuck are you situations where it's like, where did this guy come from? What the fuck is he? Get him the fuck out of here. That's exactly what it is. I've lived in that county. I know how the judges are. I know how the law enforcement is there. Um, I know how they treat people. I know how they view things. I know exactly how that situation is going to play out. Those court cases that take place in the small courtroom there are 10 minutes. They're not like what, Mr. Ross tried to pull in Columbus, where you end up having some multi-day, insane, crazy case. The judge just looks at the situation and just says, is this the kid's dad? And the person says yes. And well, under this statute in the state of West Virginia, he has a right to see this person. Now, the kid themselves can come in and state a preference, but that preference is uh, generally not considered. And so the kid can come in and say, "Well, I don't want to see this person, or I do want to see this person," and it's up to the judge. And whatever the judge orders, all parties have to comply with it, regardless. So it doesn't really operate in the way that Peter's advertising. And I think it's sad that I don't even know why he's trying to advertise that to my child. It's kind of sick. It's very, very sick. This is a 55-year-old man in Columbus, Ohio, with no children, who's not married, who is attempting to target a 15-year-old girl and write messages to her on the internet. And it suggests a very, very disturbing pattern of behavior. And so this is something where he can gaslight people and he can try to manipulate people, but it really comes down to what is actually going to happen. Essentially, the reality is that in West Virginia, what they're more concerned about with supervised visits is they're concerned that the parents are sober. By the way, that's the primary issue in the state of West Virginia, is substance abuse, and essentially making sure that a lot of the intermediary centers are there to screen, to make sure that whichever parent shows up to get the child is not inebriated. That's the primary concern in West Virginia. And then beyond that, supervised visits are entirely different. Supervised visits, I mean, whatever scenario would occur with my daughter, which I'm requesting, by the way, is for guided supervised visits in order to reintegrate each other back, so that we can not reintegrate, but integrate each other into our lives, and have an easy time doing it, and knowing how to do it without having pitfalls. So what I'm seeking is a healthy reunion with my daughter, guided obviously in a situation where there's plenty of people present. And then the thing is the way that the supervised visits work in West Virginia is that as you have them over time, the social workers watch your interaction and they write reports for each visit, and it's cumulative. And eventually, once the social workers decide, okay, this situation's fine, no more supervised visits are required, then they can submit to the court and say this is done, and there can be a modification made so they're no longer supervised. That's how the process works. Mr. Ross has never dealt with child custody. He doesn't have children. He's never been in a domestic relations court where we're talking about custody matters or visitation. And so, in fact, under West Virginia law, what would happen essentially is that the law that was passed in 2022 would require 50-50 custody. But since she's a girl, and I'm a male, it's called different parts is the way that the social workers refer to it. It would be unlikely that my daughter would come and live with me in any capacity. And that's not necessary because she's got a perfectly fine home. There's no reason for her to come and live with me. And so I just want anybody who's reading Mr. Ross's really aggressive shit that he's typing to understand that he's not telling the truth, that he's not interpreting things correctly, that he's misinterpreting literally everything he's saying, and that nothing he's saying is to be taken seriously. I have a concern with people like him that, I mean, look at he hasn't been able to get a motion through the court in 17 solid months. He's established pretty clearly that he doesn't even understand how the law works to begin with, or we wouldn't even be where we are at this point. But nonetheless, he's been pretty clear. He's put it in writing. Has he continued the same pattern of behavior? Wait till they see my information about this and this, and this happened in Ohio, and this, and he's got warrants for stalking. I don't have warrants for stalking. There is no stalking warrant for me anywhere in the state of Ohio, by the way. That would be a factual falsehood. And so I have nothing. There is nothing of that nature. You can even look it up in the system. And, so in that capacity, everybody has to basically take everything he says with a grain of salt. And people need to understand that he's just a troll. That is what the world needs to know about Mr. Ross, is that he's not telling the truth. He's just trolling. He's a very lonely man in Columbus, Ohio, and he simply gets off on hurting other people on the internet, and he's made my family his target, and that's who he's going to continue to target until he's put in prison.